Hey, I'm Matt Geiger. This video is all about how campaign finance reform works in the US today. I'll get to things like what is dark money and how do all these different groups even get their money in our elections. But if you really want to understand all these things beyond just the repetitive politician talking points, we need to build it from the ground up. In the 2020 election, a total of $14.4 billion was spent. That amount spent tends to increase every election, but this was a really unprecedented amount. For reference, in 2016, the total was $6.7 billion, so it more than doubled. Here's the breakdown of the groups that actually spent that money. Roughly a quarter each of that was spent by presidential candidates, congressional candidates, and by political parties. And then the majority of that last quarter was spent by SuperPACs, with the last small chunks spent by businesses, individuals, and other groups like 501c organizations. And I'll explain what all these groups are in a little bit. So this view here is taking all of our spend categories I just showed you on the innermost circle and breaking each one out to identify where the money actually came from. So let's start off with the one for presidential candidate spend. In 2020, the biggest source of money was from self-funding. You think about the huge amounts of money that rich candidates like Trump and Bloomberg pumped in themselves. If a candidate self-funds, there are no limits. And then large individual donors make up the second largest piece. Those are any donations over $200. Those individual donations are limited to about $3,000 per candidate per election. And then there's still a significant part for small individual donations. The one caveat here is that there's a fine line between a corporation and an individual sometimes. So for instance, let's say that a corporate executive contributes to a campaign. That's technically an individual contribution, but is he contributing as an individual? Or is he making that more as a corporate contribution in his capacity as an executive? It's impossible to say, but those are going to be recorded as individual contributions. The next quarter of the spending came from candidates for federal House and Senate seats. Over half of the funding comes from large donors here. And the other thing to point out is how small the self-funding is. The reason for that is it's really easy for incumbents to raise money, so it's rare for a sitting Congress member to have to spend much of anything of their own money. In general, the vast majority of this money goes to incumbents and not challengers in congressional races. So maybe you've noticed that we haven't seen any money yet specifically marked corporate or union. That's because we have laws preventing corporations and unions from directly contributing money to candidates. But around the 1940s, to get around this, PACs were created. PAC stands for Political Action Committee, and these are just organizations set up to raise and spend money to elect or defeat certain candidates. So for instance, a business can't contribute directly to a campaign, but it can set up a PAC loosely associated with the business or the industry that business is in. The business can contribute to that PAC, and the PAC is allowed to contribute to candidates. There are strict dollar limits on PACs, though. Their campaign contributions are limited to $5,000 per year per candidate and $15,000 per national party. And that's why PACs are really not a player on the presidential races. PACs also can't accept more than $5,000 per year from any one donor. Because of all these limits, PACs are not usually perceived to be an area of concern or an area of abuse. Political party spending is the next piece. After restrictions were put on PACs, political parties became the place to funnel unlimited money for a while. But in 2002, McCain-Feingold put limits on how much individuals and groups could contribute to political parties, and they put limits on how much political parties could contribute to candidates. Individual contributions to national political parties are limited to about $35,000 per year, so what we have now is the political parties are getting their contributions from similar sources as congressional campaigns, with the key difference being that smaller donors make up a larger share. So up until this point, all the contributions we've talked about have been regulated by the Federal Election Commission, FEC. But in 2010, the Supreme Court and DC Appeals Court determined that political spending is a form of speech protected under the First Amendment if it's done independent of any candidate or political party, in the cases Citizens United versus FEC and SpeechNow.org versus FEC. And this gave birth to the SuperPAC. SuperPACs can raise unlimited amounts of money from whoever they want and spend it however they want, as long as they don't coordinate with a political campaign. They're under their own slice here because they are the ones actually spending the money. It doesn't end up with a campaign or political party, even if there are clear ideological connections. And I do just want to clarify a couple misconceptions about SuperPACs. The name SuperPAC sounds similar to PAC, but they're completely different. SuperPACs raise and spend unlimited unlimited money independent of a campaign, and PACs exist to raise and spend money directly in concert with a campaign, and they have all sorts of dollar restrictions, unlike the SuperPACs. Also, SuperPACs in themselves are not dark money groups. They register with the FEC and declare their contributors. The problem, though, is that sometimes the contributors themselves have found ways to hide their identities. The first way is through 501c nonprofit organizations. These groups are social welfare organizations, labor organizations, or business leagues. So think groups like the Chamber of Commerce, union groups, the NRA, and social justice groups. They're allowed to contribute to elections as long as the contributing to campaigns is not their primary purpose of their existence. But that line obviously can sometimes be pretty blurry, which is one criticism of them. But the bigger criticism is that these groups don't need to disclose their donors. In a similar vein, some LLCs have been popping up over the last couple elections in states where ownership disclosure isn't required. So the way this works is that somebody would start an anonymous LLC by funding it with a bunch of money, spends the money however they want to help get somebody elected or advance some other political goal, and then they dissolve the LLC, never having to disclose who contributed the money or who owns that LLC. Remember, the only requirement is that the group isn't coordinating with any campaign directly. As long as they abide by that, they can contribute however much they want and spend it however they want. So the 501c groups and anonymous LLCs are what's known as dark money, and that's how they're able to mask their donors, and you could see the size of the slices to understand how prevalent they are and where they are able to sneak into the system. So here's my takeaway. Lots of politicians like to get on their soapboxes and criticize big money and dark money, but as incumbents, they are all the biggest benefactors of the system. We don't need politicians hypocritically demonizing the system with broad generalizations while they're reaping the rewards of that system. We need good discussions around the specifics of how the system exists today and what we can actually do to fix its biggest problems. When we can dig deeper, get a better understanding, and have those sorts of conversations, that's when we'll be able to make some real changes. Thanks for watching. Hey, if you found this video interesting or useful, please give it a thumbs up, put a comment below, and subscribe to my channel to get any updates on new videos. If you didn't like it, you should probably go ahead and put a comment below too to let everybody know. Either way, thanks for watching.